On today's show, the Yankees joined forces with the Rays to do something unexpected but needed during Thursday night's game. This special edition of Locked On Yankees is going to be a little different than others, but we hope it brings some comfort to people during a dark week.
You are Locked On Yankees, your daily New York Yankees podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Yankees fans. Welcome to Locked On Yankees, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Abbey and Stacey. I'm joined by my co-host, Stacey Gotsoulias. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Yankees your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including Apple, Odyssey, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can watch and subscribe to us on YouTube. Also, hit the like button on our videos, and please comment if you feel so inclined. When you get to your car, you can tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Yankees. So it's been quite a trying week. Look, living through the last few years, you could say that that's sort of an evergreen statement, but 3 shootings in 1 week. And the other day with the Uvalde shooting and how the sort of reporting process has played out and the more information we find out, it just feels like sports are a little bit irrelevant right now. It really does. It's hearing that so many kids were gunned down in such a senseless act of violence. And then, of course, the political infighting that always seems to follow. You know, it's not time to politicize this and it's not time to talk about gun control. Okay, well, then when is it? When is it? And then it's an exhausting cycle. This happens in no other country. This doesn't happen anywhere else. And it's the last few years, given all of the events that have unfolded, you know, starting with COVID and George Floyd and the ensuing sort of racial conversations and protests that we were having, and war in Ukraine, you know, recession, inflation. Sometimes sports feel sort of pointless. And me as a reporter, I've had trouble in the last few years focusing on my job because it feels like this doesn't mean anything and these other things mean more. And how are we all supposed to just move on with our lives and like watch baseball? Right. You know, it feels a little bit almost insensitive because there are so many people who are in a position right now who can't just move on and shift their attention and watch baseball as a distraction. I don't know how you've been feeling about this, Stacey, but you know, when I saw that the Yankees and the Rays decided to do something about it yesterday, it really felt like, okay, you know, I'm not alone in feeling like this.
Right. Tuesday, I didn't record a show. I was feeling anxious anyway. I was just, you know, sometimes my anxiety is too much for me and I can't function. And then I found out about the shooting and I was getting ready to record because I wanted to try and push myself through it. And then when the news came out, I just thought, I'm not going to be able to talk about baseball right now with something like this happening. You know, all of the mass shootings are tragic, but there's something different when children are involved.
Yeah.
It's just
little kids. These are elementary school kids.
Yeah. You know, it was their last week of school. They were, you know, watching there's one girl, they interviewed her not on camera. She didn't want to be interviewed by a man because she's now terrified of men because the shooter was a male. She covered herself with her friend's blood and played dead in the classroom. Oh, yeah. She said they were watching Lilo and Stitch because, you know, it was 3 days before the end of the school year. They were done with all their work. She said that the teacher had gotten an email saying there was a guy with a gun outside, and she went to the door, and he was right there. And this little girl is obviously traumatized. You know, you think about the kids who were killed, But you also think about the kids who watched their friends and teachers get killed.
They're never going to be the same.
No.
Their innocence was taken from them.
She's in 4th
And
grade, and she had the wherewithal to think, I have to put blood on myself and play dead so he doesn't kill me. What kind of a country are we in where people find this okay and they think it's not necessary to pass gun laws? We're not trying to take guns away. We're trying to make it
we're trying to
so
keep them out of the hands of people like Salvador Ramos, who committed this horrific act. That's all.
Yeah.
And it's becoming like you can't just keep ignoring it. And I Tuesday I had to write about goalie interference, which felt very pointless, and I also had to write about racism, a racial incident in hockey.
Yeah.
And it was just I was sitting at my grandmother's house in California, and I just felt very heavy. My mom sent me a video of my my friend's daughter who is about to turn 5, and she just graduated from preschool yesterday, and she's going to go into kindergarten. She was practicing the Pledge of Allegiance because they all had to do the Pledge of Allegiance for the first time at their like preschool graduation ceremony. And at the end, the way that she said, "With liberty and justice for all," she went like, if you can see me on YouTube, if you're not listening on YouTube, if you're listening on the radio or on podcast network, she sort of opened her arms and very enthusiastically said, "With liberty and justice for all." And it was like, I was nearly in tears because I was like, this little girl's going to go have to do active shooter drills next year in kindergarten. And just the way that she said, "With liberty and justice for all," it, like a 5-year-old thinks that we have it, wants everybody to have it. And I just, in that moment, I was nearly in tears. I just needed a moment sitting outside by myself. And writing about goalie interference just suddenly seemed so trivial almost.
Yeah.
So last night, the Yankees were playing the Rays, and they decided to team up and do something different. And I'll get into like why this is so impactful in a minute, but let me just read the tweet. They put up a graphic that said, "In lieu of game coverage and in collaboration with the Tampa Bay Rays, we will be using our channels to offer facts about the impacts of gun violence, the devastating events that have taken place in Uvalde, Buffalo, and countless other communities across our nation are tragedies that are intolerable." And I was reading that on my flight back from California, and there was a woman on my flight who I had been talking to in the airport who she said she had a friend who was a member of that church in Orange County where there was a gunman last week. And she was a few rows ahead of me, so I didn't show this to her, but like, it was just a very emotional, I don't know, it just felt very like real. Like it was almost like close. And like, I'm sitting next to somebody who knows somebody who was in the church when it got shot up. Churches, schools.
Yeah.
And for people to say that, like, to put the onus on kids and teachers to say kids need to know how to keep themselves safe and teachers need to know how to keep kids safe. No, that's not part of their jobs. We cannot put the onus on these kids.
Right.
And, put the onus on what, pastors at churches to like keep up congregations? No, it's on us as Americans to try and do something to prevent these preventable tragedies from happening. And the Yankees and the Rays teamed up to try and use their platforms for good. So what they did was they were tweeting, instead of play-by-play, they were tweeting facts. And they had every single one of them backed up by stats and sources. They linked to these sources. It was incredibly well done and informative. And a lot of people, I mean, I saw people in and out of in the sports world and out of the sports world. I saw people who were diehard Mets fans saying thank you to the Yankees and the Rays. And look, of course, there was a lot of anger in the mentions as well, because look, there's a lot of anger in the tweet today about how it's an Amazon Prime game. You're always going to get that. And there are people who don't believe in common sense gun laws, and no matter what, we're not going to change their minds. But if you can, my opinion of this is, if you can change the mind of even one person, then we're doing something. Then it's starting to work.
Right.
And I just, it felt to me like the Yankees and Rays sort of read the room and thought, this baseball game that's going on, this isn't, in the grand scheme of things, it's not very important. But if we do something to educate people, that's important. To
Right.
bring some awareness, that's important. If we get a couple people to click on these links and understand the gun violence problem in this country, then that's important. And these people feeling like, and people like me and you who were feeling like sports just didn't matter, they understood that, and it very much felt like we were not alone in feeling that.
Yeah. Because there are some times when sports is an escape from things that are happening in the world. But when it's something like this, and the more that comes out about it, it's just horrifying. The whole thing is horrifying.
It's a privilege to be able to use sports as an escape, but then you've got
Right.
the people who say like, well, this is an escape and I don't want politics brought into this. Well, guess what? That's dehumanizing to the people on the field, on the court, on the ice, who are playing these games, because they're humans with feelings about these issues as well. Zach
Right.
Britton was tweeting about it yesterday, We saw
Yeah.
lots of other athletes responding. Steve Kerr, right before he went and coached in a playoff game, crying at the podium, begging the American government to do something, and
Yeah.
even backing that up with facts and statistics, which is what you have to do, because there's always going to be people who have their, they have their talking points like, oh, the way to combat a bad guy with a gun is more good guys with a gun. Well, I think the Uvalde police showed that maybe that theory is off,
Yeah.
for one, but two, where are you getting that from? Like, what study are you citing? How has that ever been proven? Because I think it was just proven wrong. But Steve Kerr he came ready. He was armed. And he's a person who, when people wonder, like, why are these athletes doing this? I don't follow them for their political views. I follow them for sports. I don't follow them to talk about any of this. I want to just watch them on the field and escape for a little bit. Well, because they're impactful people who could possibly get people engaged, get them engaged to register to vote, get them engaged to research some of these issues, get them engaged to like go to a protest, And
I mean, Steve Kerr's father was gunned down in Beirut in
Steve Kerr's
1984.
father was, yeah.
I
So
mean,
if anybody has a right to talk about this, it's him.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And to tell athletes to stick to sports, it's just very dehumanizing, because sports are actually sort of a microcosm of society.
Of course.
It sort of illustrates the systemic issues that we have in our society in a much smaller and sort of different way.
Right.
I write a lot about the intersection of sports and society. The other day, I just had to write about Nazem Kadri facing racist, xenophobic threats from hockey fans. And so these problems exist not just in our society, but they exist in sports too. So there is no like taking the human aspect out of sports and saying these guys shouldn't talk and they don't get a say in this, because they're humans too. It always bothers me when people say stick to sports, because my job is actually to write about the intersection of sports and society. So like my job is kind of to like not stick to sports.
Yeah.
But it's a privilege when you get to use sports as a distraction for things like that. I mean, I couldn't watch baseball that night with my I love watching baseball with my grandmother. I mean, she lived in Brooklyn when she was little and watched Jackie Robinson, and like she's a diehard Brooklyn Dodger fan, an LA Dodger fan now, and she lives in Orange County, so she loves watching Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. And one of my favorite things to do is watch baseball with my Nana. She's almost 90. How many more opportunities am I going to get to watch baseball with her? And I couldn't bring myself to watch sports that night, and she couldn't either.
Yeah.
So I just think that the Yankees and the Rays teaming up to do this, and the Rays doing it would be impactful as well, but the Yankees are a legacy brand. That is a brand.
I was actually shocked that the Yankees did something. When I saw the Rays were doing it, I wasn't that surprised. But when I saw that the Yankees were teaming up with them, I thought, wow, this is big, because the Yankees, they try to stay out of things like that. Like, they started the Stonewall scholarship, but they still don't have an outright Pride Night. They kind of stay out of things like that. So for them to do something like this, I was kind of shocked by it. Happily shocked.
Yeah. I mean, what this is going to do is it's going to show other teams that it's okay to take a stand and let your fans know where you stand on something like this. And you have to do it the right way, though. And the Yankees and Rays absolutely did do it the right way by backing everything up with well-researched sources.
Yeah.
But look, the fear is that you're going to lose season ticket holders, or you're going to, lose some ratings. I think maybe that fear is subsiding a little bit. I wouldn't say that it's going away, because I've seen a lot of teams over the last few years doing things maybe not necessarily like this big, because I don't think anybody's just said since the George Floyd, or since after the Jacob Blake shooting, when the bubble teams, who were not even just the bubble teams, but baseball too, decided that they were not going to play on certain nights in protest of police brutality and systemic racism. Like, we haven't seen a team like that. Was like I thought that was a once in a lifetime moment that I was going to see. I never thought I would see a team do something like this again. And this is going to show other teams and other large brands that they can make an impact, and they can wade into something like this if they're doing it right, and if they're doing it with the right intentions. Because what we do see is like some performative tweets, and it doesn't really make that much of a difference sometimes. But the Yankees and the Rays really took the time to coordinate and make sure that they were doing this in the correct way. And it was really impactful, and it was really meaningful for a lot of people. And I think maybe this is going to open the door to some other teams doing other things. And maybe, look, I hate this, because it seems like every few weeks we're living through some sort of crisis.
Yeah.
Real tired of unprecedented times here. But maybe
the last 2 years have been, the last 2 years have been unprecedented times, and it just doesn't seem to end. We're in perpetual unprecedented times that just won't end.
And I think maybe that there's going to be other teams that see this and say, okay, when these things happen, not everybody wants to pay attention to sports. So we're going to show people that that they're not alone in that feeling. And we're going to give them we're going to give back something to them that maybe makes them feel as though, like things are going to be okay. But, we're trying to do something to combat this as well. That's what it is. Like, we're not just going to play a baseball game and act like everything is okay, because they do. They all had to play a baseball game last night and act like everything was fine when it wasn't the last few nights. And this is a way for teams to say, we understand that things aren't okay, and we're going to try and do something about it.
The other night, Trevino hits the the walk-off hit to win the game. And the first thing he said was, my thoughts and prayers are with the people in Texas because of what happened earlier today. Because he's from there. And, of course, anyone with, well, I shouldn't say anyone, because there are some people who are reacting to this like it's no big deal, which I don't understand. I tend to be overly
desensitized to it now. We're desensitized to it right now. There were 3 shootings in a week.
Yeah.
And, like, when it happened, I saw it come up on Twitter that there was an active shooter in Texas at a Texas school. And I kind of was just like, and I kept going with my story because I had a deadline. Yeah. And then it wasn't until a couple of my friends were starting to text me that I was like, okay, now I need to look and see what, like, the severity of this situation. But my first reaction was just like, I kind of shrugged and moved on, because we hear about an active shooter every week, it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, I remember being very affected by the Charleston shooting. That was the one in the church.
Yeah.
Where he went to the Bible study. He was hanging out with them. And then he decided, after sitting with them for a while, to shoot them. And, it's tragic when anyone gets shot. Let's say that. But when you see victims who are at either end of the spectrum. You have kids who haven't even lived their life yet getting wiped out by a shooter, or someone who's lived 90 years and who's grocery shopping in Buffalo and gets killed by someone who decided he doesn't like black people, so he's going to shoot and kill them. And there are people in this country who think that's perfectly fine, that people should be able to walk around with guns that can wipe out people in a matter of minutes. And I don't understand. I've never understood that.
Understand it. And you know what? I didn't grow up with guns, okay? My ex-boyfriend, though, who was in the Army, he was an infantryman in combat. To him, guns are a tool that you use for work, and he is very, he's trained on an AR-15, in an effort to sort of understand the other side. I went to a shooting range with him one time. We didn't shoot AR-15s. We shot, I don't know, just like a handgun or something, like a Glock or something, I think. And when we were leaving, he was not trying to be like super enthusiastic. I think he was hoping that I would be a little bit more enthusiastic about it than I was, but he was just trying to gauge my attitude about it. And he was like, so, you saw people in there who were practicing for a shooting competition and like having a lot of fun, joking around in there. And he was like, what did you think? And I said, honestly, the whole time I was thinking one of them could just get mad and snap and turn around and shoot any of us. And he kind of laughed and he was like, oh, you really? That was your reaction? I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not used to being around guns. It's very jarring for me to be around weapons like that. And he was like, he kind of just like sat with that for a minute. And he was like, okay, I can see how it would be like that to somebody who's never been around them. He's like, I'm so used to being around them. And this is a sport for him. And it's also a tool for him. It was great that we were able to like sort of see each other's perspectives about that. I think he better understood how I was feeling more so than I understood how he was feeling, because I still don't understand. Look, if you want to do this as a hobby, like there's probably better ways to do it. You don't have to keep an AR-15 under your bed. You can go keep it at the shooting range. Although I don't know why we need military grade weapons like for humans to begin with. Like, I get it. Like there's, you go to shooting contests and things like that, but like maybe we don't need military grade weapons for that. And I'm not talking about taking your hunting rifle away. That's a whole other culture as well. But keeping things out of the hands of people who are going to commit these horrific acts. And yeah, you can say that it's a mental health problem, and it is. But then why have mental health in this country is very difficult to access. So then let's do something about that too. It doesn't have to be either or. We don't have to say, oh, we can't pass any gun laws, but, we'll fix the mental health problem. Why can't we do both?
Right.
Why can't we pass common sense gun laws and make access to mental health care more easily accessible and easily affordable?
Right. The Path to Progress account on Instagram posted an image because everyone always brings up the Second Amendment. And, when the Second Amendment was written, guys were shooting with muskets. Okay. So they put up a comparison between a musket and an AR-15. So the musket shoots 2 to 3 bullets per minute. What the founders had in mind, used in the Revolutionary War, should be in a museum, governed by the Second Amendment. Then the AR-15 shoots 20 to 45 bullets per minute, unimaginable to the founders, used at Sandy Hook, Buffalo, and Uvalde, should be off American streets, governed by the Second Amendment. I don't want to take people's guns away. If you like shooting guns, have fun shooting your guns at whatever you're shooting at. If you're in a range and you feel the need to do it, that's fine. I had 2 uncles who were in the NRA. My Uncle Vincent had guns all over my grandparents' apartment, and when I moved into that apartment, we had to get rid of a bunch of munitions that were still in the freaking apartment. My dad's like, we gotta get rid of this stuff. I'm like, why is this still here? He hasn't lived in this apartment for like 20 years. What's going on? They had rifles in their room, and I would see him do things with the guns, and there were bullets all over the place, and they would go to a shooting range. That's what they would do. But I feel like if both my uncles were still alive, one passed away in 2009, the other one in 2010, we would be fighting like you would not believe over this issue, because I just don't understand why.
Well, my ex-boyfriend brought up a good point years ago, and it was when we were having this whole conversation about, after we had been to the shooting range, and, he really wanted me to sort of like it so that maybe that could be like a hobby we had together. And I was, no, that's not going to happen. It's fine. You are going to go to the range and you're going to shoot guns, and I am going to go to the gym and do what I do, because he hated going to the gym. He liked hiking and biking and outdoor things. We don't have to have all the same hobbies and interests.
Sure. Right.
So he said, I wouldn't be, he said, in the military, we have guns locked up in certain areas so that, like, when we're on a base, he's like, people don't just have guns in their house. We have them locked up so that we can go practice with them.
Right.
Like, it's very much a tool. They study how to use it, how to clean it, how to be safe with it. And he said, I think maybe that's it. That was his solution. Is he was like, if people want to keep guns for sport reasons, have them locked up in like a facility at like a shooting range or something like that. Like if they want to go practice for target practice. And this is not guns for like protection.
Right.
These were specifically for shooting competitions, tournaments, whatever. He said, I think maybe that could be some sort of like solution. And some of his friends had said the same thing. Like, yeah, we don't really need to keep them in our house if we're using them for like a competition. Have them locked up in like some sort of facility where we can access them when we get there to practice whatever. And look, this was not my suggestion. This is somebody who is pretty well versed in gun culture, knows a lot about it. This was his suggestion. I thought it was very interesting that he brought that up and that some of his friends brought it up as well. But they were people who treat guns very differently because they have been around them so much for work. They don't treat them as just sort of, I don't know, like, something you have around just for funsies. Like,
yeah.
It's different for them when they've been around them so much and they are so well versed in their uses. And I don't know. I think maybe there are solutions to be had, but the infighting in this country, look, we've seen it for years. It has hit a fever pitch since COVID. Oh, I probably shouldn't say fever pitch in talking about a virus like that. Oh man. It's exhausting. The news cycle is exhausting. People are constantly arguing.
Yeah.
And
I think there should be an age limit though, because a lot of these shooters are under 21. I mean, you can't get a drink. Well, I mean, you can if you find ways to do it. But legally, you're not supposed to drink till you're 21. So why is it so easy for someone who literally just turned 18 to go out and buy a bunch of bullets and a couple of AR-15s? Like, make it a little more difficult for people to do that. That's all we're asking for. That's all I want. Just make it a little more difficult for people to get military-grade weapons.
Background checks, closing gun show loopholes.
Yeah.
And I understand all of the opposition to this, and that people are going to say, well, criminals are going to find a way to get guns anyway.
Right.
Sure. But it's going to make it harder for a lot of people to find them. And I mean, I think even beyond the issue of gun violence, just everything that we have been dealing with in the last few years, COVID, wars, everyone's frustrated. Everyone's upset. People, there's been racism. There has been arguments between friends and family members have been divided. I just think that what the Yankees and the Rays did to come together and say, we want to do something that makes an impact, and we don't have to stick to baseball tonight. They're not expecting anybody to just be like, okay, back to normal, because things aren't normal right now, and they haven't been for a really long time. And I think for two professional teams like that, especially a legacy organization like the Yankees, it really makes a statement that we are not back to normal, and teams don't have to act like we are either. Now, I will say the WNBA has been very proactive about things like that throughout the last few years. I mean, they probably did more than any league when it came to some of the racial protests and the social what's the term I'm looking for? Civil rights stuff. They were probably more active than any other league. And I thought they did a really great job with some of their initiatives too. But they don't get the attention and notoriety that Major League Baseball and a team like the New York Yankees, prestige legacy brand, the pinstripes, like it's an iconic brand. How many rappers do we see wearing the interlocking NY, like wearing the Yankees logo? That was such a big deal when LeBron wore a Yankees hat to a Cleveland game back in, like, what was it, 2007?
Yeah, that was, yeah.
It makes a lot of people realize that, like, they're not alone in this really strange feeling that we have right now.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of people, like, thanking the Yankees and saying, we needed this like, them in particular, they needed it. And I think it's going to help a lot of other organizations be able to say, okay, we can do something as well. Let's figure out what it is that we should be doing and what we want to do in order to make a difference as well. Because I've talked to some teams that, like, feel very helpless during all of this. And there's going to be some owners and some probably CMOs, marketing officers, who say, don't touch it, ignore it. Okay, so those teams will ignore it. But there's going to be other teams that are more open to this now that they've seen the Yankees do this.
Yeah.
It's just really impactful, and they did such a great job. Like, shout out to the social media team, the content team. They made a big difference last night.
Yeah.
And I hope that they feel very proud of themselves for doing that.
Yeah, I did like that they would, you mentioned it earlier, they would, sorry, thunder and lightning.
Yeah.
That they would put out a stat and then immediately have a citation, because especially on a social media website like Twitter, someone will always be quick to say, well, where did you get this info from? What's your source? So the fact that they did that with every single one of them was basic. That was, I mean, you need to do that, but it was great that they did that.
People love to do that. Last year when the Toronto Blue Jays, like, I don't know, like, put somebody on the injured list or, like, DFA'd a guy, the team account had said something, and somebody jumped in and said source, and the Blue Jays responded, us, literally, the Toronto Blue Jays.
I remember that. Yeah.
People are so quick to be like, you can't believe everything you see on the internet. Well, if it's coming from the team account, like, okay, you can believe the DFA there. But yeah. I thought that was very smart of them to do, and how they coordinated it. Like, the Rays and the Yankees both came together and had the same information and the same sources. So there was no, like, conflicting information.
Yeah. Yeah. It was quite a moment.
They didn't change a lot of people's minds. They're not going to.
Right.
But if they can get people to engage, read some of those links, and there's a lot of anger right now. There's always going to be a lot of anger, and there's always going to be people who say, I just want to watch sports to distract myself. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it is just sort of like I said, it's a privilege. Not everybody has that privilege.
Yeah. I mean, I was getting a kick out of the people who, when the Yankees first put that tweet out saying what they were doing, well, how am I going to keep track of the game? And Lindsay Adler was like, the game's on the TV, and you can listen to the game on the radio. And
also, you can, like, follow the stats online.
Like, there's game day. And I, jokingly tweeted about that. I'm like, are people really complaining that the Rays and the Yankees aren't going to do play-by-play on their account? Is that the only way they're finding out how these games are being won? Do you not have a phone? Do you not have a computer? Do you not have other websites you can go to? Like, that's the silliest complaint I've ever seen in my life. But it's Twitter. And people will do it, but
it's just like, there's a million ways to follow along, and Twitter's not the best one because people make mistakes on Twitter. I mean, I delete tons of tweets where I got the score wrong, and I hate that. People will always be like so quick to jump down my throat and be like, oh my God, what game are you watching? Like, I'm dyslexic. Sorry, I tweeted the wrong score. It happens.
Right.
We all make mistakes. There's no edit button.
Yeah,
but
well.
It was at a time when there's not a lot good, right? I mean, I won't say that. There's not a lot good. At a time when, like, people are so angry and sad and confused and frustrated, this was two pretty important professional sports franchises saying enough is enough. We're going to try and use our platform for good. And we need a little bit of good right now.
Yeah.
It was really meaningful and really, I know I keep using the word impactful. I should probably look at thesaurus.com. I had it pulled up earlier today. I closed out of it because I only have like 75 tabs open on my computer and something had to give.
Yeah.
But it really made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Not with everybody, but that's okay. You can't win over everybody.
Right.
But to just do nothing, I think is, I don't know. Look, they don't have to do anything. They did this on their own. They blow back they would be facing.
Yes.
And they still did it.
Yeah, that's why. Like I said it earlier, I was just shocked because the Yankees aren't really known for doing stuff like that. So the fact that they did that, and you know, teaming with the Rays to do it, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and I think really, more teams should do that.
Yeah, and I talked to a couple team employees, not with the Yankees, but with other teams that I know last night, who said, you know, they had wanted to do things like this in the past and they couldn't, and it was sort of heartening to see that that teams were doing it and just not holding back, and it was encouraging for them. It goes beyond gun violence. It's sort of just taking a stand on something that, just taking a stand and like advocating for the greater good. Like, these teams are such pillars of the community. 9/11, baseball played such a huge role in helping the city grieve, you know? These teams they are out in the community doing things. They are, you know, what Brian Cashman sleeps with the homeless every year, you know?
Yeah.
Well, the Stonewall Scholarship, parts of charities that these teams establish, they are out in the community trying to make a difference. And they are also, like, we've talked about this many times, they feel like members of our family, like they're at our homes every night, especially the broadcasters. Like, they are in our homes every night. If there's one thing we can count on in like a weird time, it's that sense of normalcy that comes on when you're turning on a baseball game every night. Right. And that's a good thing. But your sense of normalcy is still disrupted, even though there's baseball on sometimes. And I just thought that for members of the community to use their platform like this, this was just really meaningful. I'm not going to use the word impactful again. This is my pet peeve as a writer, using the same words over and over, and I tend to do it. You know, the other day I had to delete a story where I used the word rhetoric like 5 times. I was like, that's not a word for rhetoric.
I know what that feels like. Not that I've written in a while, but I remember those days being like, why did I use this word 3 times in one paragraph? I need to use a thesaurus. What the hell?
So bravo, Yankees. Yankees social media, marketing, content. I mean, from right on down, because this had to get permission, I'm sure, all the way up at the top. This isn't something that just somebody who tweets every night can pull off by themselves. Bravo, Yankees. Bravo, Rays.
Yeah.
I hope other teams follow.
Definitely.
So that's it for this episode of Locked On Yankees, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Stacey and I would like to remind you can listen to this show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever else you get your podcasts. You can watch and subscribe to us on YouTube. Again, like and comment on YouTube as well. Stacey will try and respond to your comments. I will also try, but I can't guarantee it. I'm sorry. I can't guarantee it. I try. When you get in your car, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On MLB. Now make your second listen of the day Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on Major League's past and present. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. One more thing, if you could be so kind, please rate the podcast and spread the word about this podcast to your fellow Yankee fans. We'd really appreciate it. Enjoy your weekend. We'll talk to you next week.